Greetings, Commanders, and welcome to the Evolution or Warrior Club video. This video is going to be about Sky Kingdoms and Ark of War because they're essentially the exact same troops, same cost, same time, exactly the same. So if you play Ark of War or Sky Kingdoms, you know this information goes to both. Okay, that being said, in Sky Kingdoms, just like Ark of War, there's a Warriors Club, and what this lets you do is it lets you evolve Tier 1 into Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, all the way up to Tier 11. Now, I don't have Tier 11, and I haven't got the math on it, but for the sake of this video, let's just do Tier 2 through Tier 10, and let's cover all the math. I have a complete spreadsheet of all the breakdowns and percentages of when it's worth it, when it's not, and then just some actual anecdotes of what I've experienced as a player, and some information that hopefully will save you millions and millions and millions of resources or protect you from not building an army because you think you're going to lose money. Because for the most part, except for Tier 3 and Tier 4, you should always evolve. And we'll get into that now. So, okay, first things first is Tier 1 is so cheap that if you need a Tier 2 army with the current meta of both games, you should always have a ton of Tier 2 because dollar for dollar, they're the best troop. Yeah, they're susceptible to tier suppression, but it's not like Tier 1 that it's so weak that it's useless. Tier 2 actually can kill higher tier stuff, especially when you get some nice skill triggers. And the cost of doing it is, and I'll show you the spreadsheet here in a second, is basically 7% loss. So the way you do the math is the evolution of, let's do airships, that's what the math is based on. It's all the same, but we're doing it on airships for the spreadsheet's sake. So you'll see that the cost of one evolution of a seagull is 1,248 food, right there, right there, right, 1,248. Now, if I go back and look at the price of one hummingbird, you will find out that it's 1,250. So in reality, you're not gaining a benefit. It actually costs you extra money. About 7% of the value of the hummingbird is lost because you're doing this evolution. However, if you really want to build a bunch of Tier 2, you can only build so many at once using your barracks or the academies in Sky Kingdoms. So if you really need a ton of them, just start building them at the Warriors Club. The cost is so minuscule, it really doesn't matter. Don't get caught up on that. Just build Tier 2, evolve Tier 2 like crazy if you need it. When it comes to Tier 3 and 4, it's never worth it to evolve Tier 3 and Tier 4 just for the sake of getting rid of your Tier 2. Now, if you want to get rid of your Tier 3 because you just unlocked Tier 4, then yeah, go ahead and evolve it. The cost is about 13% of the total value. But remember, it's worth evolving. I'm going to say this throughout the video to imprint this into your head. The troops are worthless if you do not use them. So yes, it may cost you a little extra money to evolve it, but it's better to pay that 10 or 20% than to never use the troops at all. Because I can tell you right now, those 920 Hinds I have right there, I never use them. The 901 Tier 4 I have right there, I never use them. The Tier 5, I never use it. Occasionally, I'll use Tier 6 and Tier 7 as one unit for like an anti-tier suppression march, but that's for more of an advanced video. I'm not really getting into it in this video. But essentially, Tier 3 and Tier 4, if you're gonna build it, just build it for when you need it, and most people that are getting Tier 3 and Tier 4 are not too far away from Tier 5. And if that's the case, it is always best to evolve Tier 4 to Tier 5. So let's jump into the spreadsheet here, and I'll show you what I mean. So this is where it gets interesting. Now I'm zoomed in a little bit here. So there's the flat cost of Tier 1. Now the reagents are at the top. Troop, food, parts, energy, total resources. And I don't have time on here because evolving does take time, and it is worth mentioning. And you don't get points for it during the build troop event, but we don't really care so much. Right now, what we're worried about is saving money during evolve and making sure we don't lose too many resources when we're evolving one tier to the next. Okay, so I know that no one likes spreadsheets and videos. I'm the one who made the spreadsheet. I know how to read it. It makes a lot of sense to me. But let me just break it down for those of you that want to stop for a second and figure out what I'm talking about, or maybe you're coming back because you're about to evolve a big army and you want to double check your math with mine. Here's how I did it. For Tier 2, right here under me, ding, 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 Tier 2, and everything in that square right here, that's all Tier 2. It has the base cost of what Tier 2 normally would cost if I just built it at the Academy, right? 1250, 1250, 250 right up here. And then I have in the gray line what it costs at the Academy to just evolve it, like I said, 1248. And then I have just the base cost if I wanted to build the Tier 1, which I would need to evolve into Tier 2, right here. So basically what you do is you just take the total value of what it costs to evolve it and build the tier 1, and then you just minus off what it would cost to just build the tier 2 straight up, and that's the amount of money you lose. So in this case, I actually do lose about 8% of what I put into it. 8% from tier 1 to tier 2, like I said, it actually is. Tier 10% is a lot when you start talking hundreds of millions, but we're not. We're talking a small tier 1, tier 2 army here, and you could build this stuff all day long as fast as your resources come in. So I consider that negligible. If you need tier 2, evolve it as much as you can. Okay, tier 3, tier 4, I've kind of touched on this earlier. You can evolve from tier 2 to tier 3. It really doesn't hurt that bad. The loss is 5% here, and the total resources, 1,325 total resources per troop, is a bit negligible, and that is for airships. So as far as I'm concerned, if you really want to go if you just unlock tier 3 and you want a bunch of them, go ahead and evolve them. Get some value out of those tier 2 if you weren't going to just keep building tier 2. And as far as tier 4 is concerned, it's actually costly to evolve tier 3 into tier 4. You lose another 15% across the board right here. 15% food, 15% parts, 15% of the base reagent, which is, gas or brimstone, whatever game you play. But the total loss is 12,000. So, and tier 4 and tier 3 obviously a bit more expensive than tier 2. So the question is should you ever evolve tier 3 into tier 4? Maybe just to get rid of it. If you're not going to use the tier 3 anyway, you may as well evolve it. But as a general rule, you wouldn't intentionally build tier 3 to evolve it into tier 4. And the reason I say that is because when it comes time to evolve or to get tier 5, do you notice all that green right there? That's because if you want to make tier 5, a giant tier 5 army, it is actually cheaper, much cheaper, to just build a bunch of tier 4 and then evolve it to tier 5. Resource-wise, it's 16 or 15% less overall. Now granted, remember, you have to build the tier 4 and evolve it, as opposed to just straight up building the tier 5. But technically, it is much cheaper to just evolve a tier 5 army. Now there is a quest to build tier 5, but that's minor stuff. The same thing goes for when you're building tier 6. Once you finally unlock tier 6, you say, haha, I've got all these tier 5 troops. Should I evolve them, or should I build tier 6 straight up, or should I evolve them? Well, the fact is once you unlock tier 6, you're probably going to want a big army of tier 6. Sometimes people skip it. I skip it. But if you did want to evolve it, the cost is about the same. In fact, it's a little bit cheaper. You'll notice it's 4% more expensive food and parts, but it's 15% cheaper for the third resource. So all in all, if you want to build a big tier 6 army and you have tier 5, you should absolutely evolve it. Now, you should always evolve it, right? Even if you don't have a bunch of tier 5, it's still better to build tier 4, evolve it to tier 5, then evolve the tier 5 to tier 6. Absolutely. That's the way you should go from 4, 5, and 6. You profit all the way. It's all good. The problem is, once you get tier 7, all of a sudden, you have a big tier 6 army. Now you have tier 7. In order to convert all of your tier 6 into tier 7, not only do you lose 25% resource per unit, you actually have to pay the full cost of the shadow matter or dragon scale as well. So tier 7 is where it really starts to get, you start paying the piper. They were giving you a free ride. They were letting you carry your army, evolve it, no punishment. And then tier 7 comes along and they say, okay, hold on. Now that you have tier 7, you're a serious player, you have to take a penalty. And the penalty is, if you want the tier 7 troops, you got to pay a premium if you're evolving them. If you build them straight up, that's fine. But if you have a bunch of tier 6, once you have tier 7, you don't use tier 6 anymore. You'll never use it again. You might use it because you just had overlaps when you're fighting. You'll just say, I still have all this tier 6, I can't afford to evolve. You might use it in that case. But generally, you always want to use that tier 7 if you can. So evolve it until it's all gone, guys. That's the way you do it. Now, it's unfortunate because it costs more, but it's not as bad as tier 8. Now, I don't have any fancy pictures to go with the tier 8, and the tier 8 certainly looks very cool. But if you thought evolving from tier 6 to tier 7 was bad, evolving from tier 7 to tier 8 is even worse. Is even worse. Actually, it's not. I'm sorry. It's actually not worse. It doesn't cost you any more shadow matter. It literally just says it's just 20% more. It averages out to be slightly cheaper evolving tier 7 to tier 8 than it is tier 6 to tier 7. And I know when I say it fast like that in the video, it's hard to grab onto. But just go with the numbers in front of you, okay? You lose 20% when you go from tier 6 to tier 7. You lose 20% when you go from tier 7 to tier 8. And then the real... Dang it, I can't say... I got to be careful with the words I choose. The real kick in the bells here is going from tier 8 to tier 9. The game does not like when you go from tier 8 to tier 9. Those are advanced troops. Those are not in Sky Kingdoms yet, but every other player knows about tier 9 in Ark of War. It's amazing, right? Tier 9 really is the game changer. I did a video one time called We Need to Talk About Tier 9. It was one of my original videos, and it's because once you have tier 9, all of a sudden you can start farming level 13 monsters for the kill event on Tuesday with basically no gear and any commander that can hold 1,000 leadership. And you could farm 13 monsters nonstop with all your commanders without taking losses. And it really does change the game because of how powerful those troops are. And they're dual troop type. And they have 5 times as much units per unit slot. So they're amazing. So yeah, they're a lot bigger. They're a lot more expensive. And you do pay for them evolution-wise as well. So if you got suckered into building a massive tier 7 or tier 8 army, which a lot of people do, when it comes down to it and you want to get tier 8 or tier 9, you're going to pay for it. And it's a 50% increase. Okay, I'm going to go over this one more time. If you're still here and you're still paying attention, you're still going, Jesus, Melt, are you sure? Yes. And the reason is because the tier 8 base cost is 1.68 million. The tier 9 base cost is 1.65 million. Tier 9 base cost is actually cheaper than tier 8. God, is that right? I gotta double check my own math on that because that doesn't sound right. Pretty sure it's right though. And it's a 50% loss, but you have to go back and ask yourself, what am I gonna do with this tier 8 once you have tier 9? You've already put millions and hundreds of millions into your tier 8 army. What are you gonna do with that tier 8 troop? Well, you probably just gotta pay the 50% extra, evolve it into tier 9. You can't do nothing else with them. You can't trade the troops in. You can't sell them back. So that's pretty much that, guys. You've got to just go for it. That's why you don't see a lot of people in Ark of War with tier 8 armies. Once people get to Ark Hall 21, they just skip tier 8. So at 18, they get tier 7. They ride out tier 7 until Ark Hall 21, and they go for advanced research. The free-to-play players are more likely to get... tier 8, but even tier 8 research is super expensive. It's really a legacy troop that existed before tier 9. That's why it was so popular, and it still doesn't make sense to get to this day. So there it is. 1.65 million is the base cost right here. 1.65 million food, and that's across the board. I guess I covered that kind of at the beginning, but the troop cost for everything is literally just like airships are 3 times bigger than infantry, so the cost is 3 times more. So if you click on tier 9 here, it's 550K. The airships should be 1.65, right? And there it is. Exactly the same. The reagent can change because they use cash instead of gas right here. But even then, it's all the same. It's all the same. Just treat it as the same. Don't get caught up in the details too much. Okay, so yeah, the base price is 1.65 million. The tier 8 is 1.68 million. It's actually cheaper to build them. Now, of course, the Genesis also takes unlimited crystal, which costs real money. Right there. Thank you. But you recuperate 50% of it back if you evolve your tier 8. And I think that pretty well covers it. Now, I didn't talk about the Dragon, the other tier 8 unit, which is the guild-only one. That's a whole nother video. I think Suave did a video on that talking about it. He did a pretty good job of it. They're a bit more expensive. The stats aren't as good, but they don't require shadow matter, so that's nice. So I'm not going to go into that anymore. But that's basically it. So let's conclude this video, guys. When it comes down to it, and you need tier 2, always evolve tier 1 into tier 2. If you just unlock tier 3 or tier 4 and you want to have a tier 3 or tier 4 army, then go ahead and evolve it. The cost isn't that bad. But when it comes to making tier 5 and tier 6, you should always build tier 4 and just evolve it. Take the time, nice and slow. You'll save a lot of money in the long run. And the cost of healing these troops is expensive, so that money saved will come back to you. That's value you'll get later on. But if you absolutely have to build tier 5 for a quest, go ahead and do it. It's not that big of a deal. But if you do plan on building a massive army, start with evolving tier 4, or start with building tier 4 and evolving it to tier 5 and tier 6. But like I said, when it comes to tier 7, yeah, you may want to just evolve the existing tier 5 and tier 6 you had, but don't intentionally build tier 4, tier 5, and tier 6 to evolve it into 7. Just build 7 straight up once you've evolved all of your lower tier stuff that you want to. Obviously, skip tier 8 if you can. Sky Kingdoms doesn't have tier 9 yet, so people may get a big army there, and you'll get 50% of it back if you do evolve it into tier 9 later. Oh, the only other thing I didn't mention, when going from tier 9 to tier 10, the cost is 100% equal. So the cost of evolving a tier 9 troop versus the cost of just building, the cost of evolving a tier 9 into a tier 10 is identical to the cost of just building a tier 10 straight up. So tier 9 troop plus the evolve cost equals a tier 10 total cost. So if you had a big tier 9 army, you can go ahead and evolve it. Or if you just want to build tier 10 straight up, it's equal. And so that's great. That was a nice benefit. When I got tier 10, I didn't have to pay any penalties to evolve the entire army. And at that point, the army's worth billions of resources. So that was a nice reward. So I hope this video helps you guys. I hope it wasn't too long-winded. I tried to hit the conclusions in the fronts and the ends there. I hope the math is useful for you guys, and I hope you didn't waste a bunch of resources intentionally trying to evolve tier 6 into tier 7. Yeah. So my name is Melt, and remember,